Hello, I am Muriel, and I am here to discuss you about the timeline of the history of linguistics. So, for this one, let's go directly starts with Sumerians, wherein it is 4,000 years before the present. So, here in Sumerians, we can see, Sumerians is the earliest known civilization in the historical region of southern Mesopotamia. So, there are some fun facts regarding Sumerians. One is that Sumerians were the first to develop writing, used over 500 pictographs, which over time evolved into cuneiform script. So another fun fact is that in Sumerian, the linguistic texts from the earliest part of the traditions were a list of nouns in Sumerians as well. So after Sumerians, here comes Hindu traditions, wherein Indian linguistics was not itself historical in orientation. Its roots lays in the changes language undergo in the course of time. So for this one example, actually language does not stick in just one part wherein as the time goes on, linguistics or language is changing. It depends on the culture or depends on the time that people are into or the times wherein they are learning how to properly speak the language itself. So in Hindu traditions, the topics that was covered by modern linguistics, semantics, grammar, phonology, and phonetics were all treated at length in Indian traditions as well. So we have here Panini, wherein Panini was the one who wrote the grammar of Sanskrit between 600 BC and 300 BC. So here Panini has wrote Astadhyayi, wherein Astadhyayi is the uh, Sanskrit treatise on grammar written in the 60th to 50th century BCE by the Indian grammarian Panini. So this Astadhyayi means 8 chapters or 8 books. It is a grammar that describes a form of an early Indo-Aryan languages. So it distinguishes between usage in the spoken language, and it is a generative as well as descriptive. So when Panini has wrote this work of him set the linguistic standards for classical Sanskrit. It sums up to 4,000 sutras, the science of phonetics and grammar that had evolved in the Vedic religion. So when Panini has uh, divided his work into 8 chapters, each of which is further divided into quarter chapters beyond defining the morphology and syntax of Sanskrit languages as well. So, after this Astadhyayi, here comes the Vakyapadiya, wherein Vakyapadiya was written by Bhartrhari. It was written by Bhartrhari at the 50th to 70th century AD. So, the Vakyapadiya is the sentence. The sentence should be interpreted as a single unit which conveys its meaning in a flash, just as picture it as first perceived as a unity, notwithstanding subsequently analyzed into its component colored shapes. So that's uh, the authors that was actually introduced language and linguistics on the Hindu traditions, Panini and Bartrari. Bartrari. So let's go for the next one. It is on the time of the Greeks, 15th century BC onwards. So on this part, the Greeks, it is the philosophical and theoretical questions were investigated, wherein they have subsequently, it is the part wherein the Greeks has this take researches regarding with the languages and linguistics that people should have, and the themes of Themes of importance include the origin of language, parts of speech systems, and relation between language and thought, and the relation between the two aspects of word signs, whether form and meaning are connected by nature or purely by convention, arbitrary. So, in this one, Plato's Cratylus at the time 427 to 347 BC represents Socrates arguing for original natural connections that were subsequently obscured by convention. So next one is Aristotle at the time of 384 to 322 BC. By contrast, favored convention over nature. So we can see on this part that Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle has different philosophies or different ideas regarding with the language and the languages that is pertaining to the linguistics that we have. So next one is the Greek syntax. It was first described by Apollonius Discolos at the 110 to 175 uh, Anno Domini time. So for the Greek syntax that was stated by Apollonius Apollonius Discolos. So Greek syntax means it is the grammar of modern Greek as spoken in present day Greece and Cyprus is essentially that of uh, Demotic Greek, but it has also assimilated certain elements of Katarevusa, the archaic learned variety. So syntax in Greek is derived from the Greek word syntaxis, meanings together and sequence. The term is used for the way in which words are put together in an orderly system to form phrases or sentences. So we can see there at the slide that it is pertaining to the Plato's Cratylus, the comedy of language that was introduced by Plato. So for the next one, let's go with the Romans. So for the Romans at the first century BC to approximately 500 Anno Domini, so Roman linguistics continued studying the themes of interest to Greek linguistics. And the primary interest was in morphology. Syntax was largely ignored. So in this time we're in, Romans will continue studying mm, the the one that was started by the Greek linguistics, but we're in it in this part they are more interested in morphology than with the syntax. So notable among Roman linguists is Varro, who produced a multi-volume grammar of Latin, of which only about a quarter has survived. So later grammars of Donatus and Priscan were highly influential in the Middle Ages. So for that one that for that time the Romans has been doing as well their philosophies and research with regarding linguistics. It has actually they tried to do multiple volume of grammar, but then only quarter of them has survived. So for the medieval period, most of the linguistics work from the medieval ages was focused on grammar, emphasizing Latin and Greek analysis. So Latin remained the language of learning, and its authority was increased by its use as the language of patristic literature and of the service and administration of the Western Church. This alone ensured that language, a high place, and linguistic studies in the early years of the Middle Ages were largely represented by the studies in the Latin grammar. So we have here Isidore of Seville. He did etymology and lexicography during the 7th century, as well as Saint Jerome. So Saint Jerome translated Bible into Latin, dealt with the theory of translation. He suggests a sense for sense translation instead of word of word. Wherein sometimes when you're translating words, uh, words per words. There are time that uh, the word that you will be translated will not um connected with the word or the meaning of the word that you are translating. So next we have here Alfred Elfric, the grammarian, wrote an introduction to Old English grammar. He noticed marked differences between Latin and Old English grammar properties. So in the history of linguistic science, the second part of the Middle Ages, from around 1100 to the close of the period, is the more significant, wherein this was the period of scholastic philosophy, in which linguistic studies had an important place and in which a very considerate amount of linguistic work was carried on. And next is the first grammatical treatise, written by an unknown Icelandic scholar known as the first grammarian. His work mostly deals with phonology and it makes a distinction in speech sounds very similar to the modern concept of the phoneme. So, next one is Thomas of Effort describe the differences in nominative case, marking nouns, verbs versus adjectives. So let's go for the next one. So for this one is the on the next slide we can see there the Renaissance at the 50th to 17th century. So during this period, grammatical descriptions were written for several European languages. The Bible was also translated into many different languages during the Renaissance. So we can see here that in this time, uh, they have um, translated every um, words or every books that was written at the very first page until now, especially the Bible for better understanding of the people on different countries, especially on the European time. So we have here Manuel Chrysoloros produced the first grammar book of Greek in Western Europe. And next one is School of Basra was heavily influenced by the writings of Aristotle. So next one is the Sibawal, who wrote a grammar of classic Arabic. Next is Dante, uh, wrote a grammar. He wrote the Vulgari Eloquentia, which experimented with combining certain aspects of several Italian dialects into a new, highly regularized philosophical language. So next one is Pierre Remy, a grammarian whose thought precludes modern concepts of European and American structuralism. And next one is Grammars for American Indian Language were published during this period. British Royal Society did a lot of work with linguistics during the early life of the society. And next one is Port Royal grammarians took a rationalist approach to language. They believe in language universals as evidenced by a common thought structure in people throughout the civilized world. Next one, next in the last slide is the time wherein it is in the 18th century Europe. In this time, we have here J.G. Herder believed that language and thought are inseparable. His teaching serves as strong precedent to the teaching of Benjamin Worf and Noam Chomsky on the generative grammar. Next one is James Harris held an Aristotelian view of grammar. He was also aware of the difference between the world's languages. Next one is James Murnay Monbodo looked for evidence of a proto-language by studying the language of primitive peoples. Next one is Sir William Jones, a judge in a British royal court in India in 1786. He wrote a paper to the Royal Society in Calcutta about the historical connection between Sanskrit and Western Europe languages, such as Greek, the Roman languages, and the Germanic languages. So, in this part, we can actually see that in this 18th century, wherein they are researching on the past, um, philosophical regarding with linguistics, wherein in this part they are the one who is improving the languages that will be that we are now discussing or reviewing with. So that is the timeline of the history of linguistics. Thank you.